You're nothing. Mona Schultz heard those words so many times they became a heartbeat pulsing through her with every blow, every insult, every night spent locked in the kennels with the dogs, while real wolves slept in warm beds above her. Nothing. Worthless. Broken. Defect. She believed it. How could she not? 22 years without a wolf. 22 years watching others shift while she remained trapped in fragile human skin. 22 years of being the shameful secret the Silvercrest pack wished they could bury. So, when they finally dragged her before the Alpha Council, when they demanded she shift or be executed for the crime of existing, Mona didn't expect a miracle. She expected to die. What she didn't expect was the voice that erupted inside her mind like thunder, after centuries of silence. What she didn't expect was fur white as starlight erupting across her skin. What she didn't expect was every wolf in that ancient chamber. Alphas, warriors, the very people who had tormented her for years falling to their knees as if struck by the hand of a goddess. They'd called her nothing. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Chapter 1. The Girl Without a Wolf. The Silvercrest Pack compound sprawled across 12,000 acres of Montana wilderness, a kingdom of pine forests and mountain streams ruled by wolves who could trace their bloodlines back 600 years. At its heart stood the pack house, a massive timber lodge where the Alpha's family lived in luxury, where pack meetings determined the fates of hundreds, and where Mona Schultz had spent the last 4 years scrubbing floors on her hands and knees. She was 22 years old, and she had never shifted. Not once. In a world where wolves emerged at 13, where the first shift was celebrated with feasts and howls and the warm embrace of pack, Mona remained stubbornly, humiliatingly human. Wolfless, they called her. Defective. Cursed. She'd heard every word. Absorbed every cruel whisper like stones dropped into still water. The ripples had long since faded. Now there was only the cold, dark, deep Mona. The sharp voice cracked through the pre-dawn silence of the packhouse kitchen. Mona's hands stilled on the pot she was scrubbing, soap suds dripping down her raw, reddened fingers. Vicky Horn swept into the kitchen like a winter storm given human form. She was everything Mona was not: tall where Mona was small, golden where Mona was pale, beloved where Mona was despised. At 20, Vicky was already being groomed to become Luna of the Silvercrest Pack, promised to Alpha Jeffrey Forbes's son since before she could walk. And she never let Mona forget it. "Did you press my dress for the lunar ceremony?" Vicky demanded, her perfect features twisted with preemptive displeasure. "The silver one with the crystal beading," Mona finished quietly. "Yes. It's hanging in your closet." Vicky's ice blue eyes narrowed. She crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and grabbed Mona's chin, forcing her face up toward the harsh fluorescent light. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you." Wolfless. Mona met her gaze. She'd learned long ago that looking away only made it worse. Predators chased prey that ran. "There's a stain on the collar," Vicky hissed. "I saw it last night. You'll fix it before the ceremony, or I'll have you whipped in the courtyard." Again. Mona's back still bore the scars from the last time. 18 lashes for dropping a tray of glasses at the Alpha's birthday celebration. She'd been feverish, dizzy from being denied food for 2 days as punishment for some imagined slight, but excuses meant nothing in the Silvercrest Pack. "I'll fix it," Mona said. Vicky released her chin with a shove that sent Mona stumbling against the counter. A cruel smile curved her perfect lips. "You know, my mother thinks we should just banish you. Send you out into the human world where you belong." She examined her manicured nails with theatrical boredom. "But I convinced her to let you stay. You're useful after all. Someone has to do the work. The real wolves are too important to bother with." Mona said nothing. There was nothing to say. "Besides," Vicky continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I enjoy watching you suffer. Every time you flinch, every time you cry when you think no one's watching, it reminds me how lucky I am. How blessed." She leaned closer, her breath hot against Mona's ear. "The moon goddess chose me, Mona. She looked at you and saw nothing worth choosing." The words landed where they were aimed, directly in the hollow space behind Mona's ribs where her wolf should have lived. "The ceremony starts at moonrise," Vicky said, straightening. "Have my dress ready. Have the ballroom spotless. And for the goddess's sake, stay out of sight. Tonight is about celebrating real wolves, and the last thing anyone needs is your pathetic presence reminding us that mistakes happen." She swept out as dramatically as she'd entered, leaving Mona alone with the dirty pots and the first pale fingers of dawn creeping through the windows. Mona allowed herself exactly 30 seconds. 30 seconds to press her wet hands against her face. 30 seconds to breathe through the familiar ache in her chest. 30 seconds to wonder, for the 10,000th time, what she had done to deserve this life. Then she picked up the pot and kept scrubbing. The lunar ceremony was the most important event on the Silvercrest Pack's calendar, a monthly celebration of the full moon that brought wolves from 3 neighboring packs to pay respects to Alpha Jeffrey Forbes and reaffirm their alliances. For Mona, it meant 18 hours of continuous work with no breaks and no food. She moved through the pack house like a ghost, invisible to the wolves who brushed past her in the halls. She polished silver until her reflection swam in every surface. She arranged flowers and folded napkins and pressed tablecloths and fixed the non-existent stain on Vicky's dress that had been nothing more than an excuse for cruelty. By the time the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and amber, Mona's vision was blurring with exhaustion. You, Wolfless. She turned to find Beta Robert Madden blocking the servants' corridor. He was a mountain of a man, second only to the Alpha in size and brutality, with a reputation for cruelty that made even other wolves uneasy. Alpha wants the ceremonial chalices brought to the courtyard, he said. Now. Mona's heart sank. The ceremonial chalices were solid silver, ancient and irreplaceable, and they were stored in the vault, 3 floors up. Carrying them down the narrow servants' stairs was a task that usually required 2 wolves with supernatural strength and balance. I'll need help, she said carefully. They're too heavy for crossed. Robert's hand shot out and closed around her throat, lifting her onto her toes. Did I ask for your opinion, defect? His voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it worse. The Alpha wants his chalices. You'll bring them. And if you drop a single one, I'll break every bone in your hands and make you watch while we melt them down for scrap. He released her, and Mona crumpled against the wall, gasping. Clock's ticking, Robert said, and walked away. Mona pressed her hand against her bruised throat and climbed the stairs. The chalices weighed approximately 40 pounds each. There were 6 of them. Mona managed the first trip without incident, her arms screaming in protest as she navigated the narrow stairs with 2 chalices clutched to her chest. The second trip was harder, her muscles were shaking now, her grip slick with sweat. On the third trip, she met Vicky on the stairs. Later, Mona would wonder if it was intentional. If Vicky had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Oh, Vicky exclaimed, pressing herself against the wall as if Mona had nearly collided with her. Watch where you're going, Wolfless. Her elbow caught the rim of the chalice in Mona's left hand. Time slowed. Mona watched the ancient silver vessel tip, watched it slip from her exhausted grip, watched it tumble down the stairs in a series of clanging bounces that seemed to echo through the entire pack house. The chalice hit the bottom and cracked. Not shattered, it was too solid for that, but a hairline fracture split the bowl from base to rim, rendering it useless for ceremonial purposes. Mona stood frozen on the stairs, still clutching the remaining chalice, as footsteps thundered toward her from every direction. Vicky's face was a mask of theatrical horror, but her eyes were gleaming with triumph. She dropped it. Vicky breathed as wolves began to gather. I tried to warn her, but she destroyed it. I didn't, Mona started. Enough. Alpha Jeffrey Forbes emerged from the crowd like a thundercloud given form. He was past 60 but showed no signs of age, a massive wolf with silver-streaked hair and eyes the color of frozen amber. Power radiated from him in waves that made lesser wolves bow their heads instinctively. Mona dropped to her knees. Not out of respect, out of survival. The Alpha descended the stairs slowly, each footstep deliberate, and crouched to examine the cracked chalice. When he rose, his face was expressionless. That was the most terrifying thing of all. This chalice, he said quietly, has been in my family for 400 years. It survived wars, it survived hunters, it survived the Great Purge of 1847. He turned to look at Mona, still frozen on the stairs. And you destroyed it in an instant of carelessness. Alpha, please, it was an accident. Accidents, the Alpha cut her off, are unacceptable, especially from a wolfless burden who contributes nothing to this pack but her labor. He looked at the gathered wolves. What would you have me do with her? The suggestions came quickly, eagerly. Banishment. 20 lashes. Brand her. Sell her to the Blackwood pack, they're always looking for servants. Through it all, Mona stayed on her knees, her head bowed, her body trembling. She'd learned that begging only made them crueler. Defiance only made them more creative. Silence was the only armor she had left. Interesting suggestions, the Alpha mused. But I think... No. I think this calls for something more permanent. His lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The chalice can be repaired by a master silversmith. The cost will be substantial, and you, Wolfless, will work off every cent. Your status is hereby reduced from pack servant to pack property. You will sleep in the kennels with the hunting dogs. You will eat what they eat. You will work until your debt is paid or until your body gives out, whichever comes first. Mona's vision blurred. The kennels. She'd seen wolves sent there before. They never lasted long. Take her, the Alpha commanded. Rough hands grabbed her arms, and Mona was dragged down the stairs, past the cracked chalice, past Vicky's satisfied smirk, toward the back of the pack house where the kennels waited. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. But somewhere deep inside her in that hollow space where her wolf should have been, something stirred. Something that had been sleeping for a very, very long time. And it was starting to wake up. Chapter 2. The Kennels. The kennels were worse than Mona had imagined. They were built into the hillside behind the pack house. A series of concrete cells with rusted iron bars, designed to house the pack's hunting dogs between expeditions. The smell hit her first urine and wet fur, and something older, darker, like despair, had soaked into the very stones. The wolves who dragged her there threw her inside without ceremony. She hit the concrete floor hard, her palms scraping against the rough surface, and the iron door clanged shut behind her before she could even rise. Sweet dreams, Wolfless, one of them laughed. Try not to let the rats eat your face. Their footsteps faded into the night, and Mona was alone. She sat up slowly, taking inventory of her new prison. The cell was perhaps 8 feet by 6, with a concrete shelf jutting from one wall that might generously be called a bed. A drain in the center of the floor suggested how waste was meant to be managed. A small, barred window near the ceiling let in slivers of moonlight, just enough to see the scratches on the walls. Names. Dates. Desperate messages, carved by those who had come before. Elara, 1987, Goddess forgive me. 3 months. I can't do this anymore. They promised it would end. They lied. Mona pressed her back against the cold wall and wrapped her arms around her knees. The lunar ceremony would be starting now. She could hear distant music, laughter, the howls of wolves celebrating beneath the full moon. A world away from this concrete tomb. She didn't cry. Tears had stopped coming years ago, beaten out of her by a pack that saw emotion as weakness. Instead, she focused on breathing in through her nose, out through her mouth, and tried to remember the last time she'd felt safe. Her grandmother's face swam into her memory. Soft hands and softer voice, the smell of herbs and wood smoke. A cottage at the edge of pack territory where Mona had spent the first 12 years of her life. You're special, little moon, her grandmother used to say. The goddess has plans for you. Great plans. But grandmother had died the winter before Mona's 13th birthday, and without her protection, Mona had been absorbed into the pack house as a servant. Her mother, whoever she was, had abandoned her at birth. Her father was unknown, unnamed, possibly not even Wolf. There was no one left who thought she was special. There was no one left at all. Morning came slowly, gray light filtering through the barred window in reluctant increments. Mona hadn't slept. Every sound had jolted her awake, the skittering of rats in the walls, the distant howls of wolves running their territory, the occasional scream that might have been animal or might have been something worse. The door to her cell clanged open at dawn. Up, property. A wolf she didn't recognize stood in the doorway, young, maybe 18, with the hard eyes of someone who'd learned early that cruelty was currency in the Silvercrest pack. He threw a bundle of gray fabric at her feet. New uniform. You've got 5 minutes to change, then you're on latrine duty for the East Wing. Mona picked up the fabric. It was rough, scratchy, more burlap than cloth. A single garment that fell somewhere between a sack and a dress, designed to mark her as less than the lowest servant. She changed quickly, mechanically, while the young wolf watched with undisguised contempt. "Faster next time," he said when she was done. "And don't bother remembering my name. You don't get to use it. You call me sir. You call everyone sir, or ma'am. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't make eye contact. You don't exist unless someone needs you to exist. Understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Move." The next 3 weeks blurred together in an endless cycle of degradation. Mona cleaned latrines, scrubbed floors, hauled garbage, and performed every task too disgusting or demeaning for even the lowest-ranked wolves. She ate scraps, literally, whatever was left in the dogs' bowls after they'd had their fill. She slept on concrete. She woke before dawn and worked until she collapsed. And every day, it got worse. Vicky made certain of that. "Oh, look who's on her knees again," Vicky would coo, finding Mona wherever she worked. Right where she belongs. Sometimes it was just words. Sometimes it was a kick, a slap, a fistful of hair yanked until Mona's eyes watered. Once, Vicky poured an entire bucket of dirty mop water over Mona's head and laughed as she sputtered and gasped. "You should thank me," Vicky said. "It's the closest thing to a bath you'll get this month." The other wolves followed Vicky's lead, as they always did. The future Luna set the tone, and the tone was clear. Mona Schultz was less than nothing. Hurting her wasn't cruelty, it was entertainment. Through it all, Mona endured. Not because she was strong, not because she had hope, but because the alternative, giving up, letting them win, felt like the final betrayal of the grandmother who had believed in her. "You're special, little moon." The words had become a mantra, repeated in the darkest hours when Mona's body screamed for rest, and her mind whispered that death would be easier. The goddess has plans for you. Even if Mona no longer believed it. Even if the words felt like a lie told to a child too young to know better. They were all she had left. On the 23rd day, everything changed. Mona was cleaning the grand staircase, the same staircase where she dropped the chalice when the front doors burst open and a delegation of wolves swept into the pack house. She pressed herself against the wall, making herself as small as possible, but she couldn't help watching. They were unlike any wolves she'd seen before. The Silvercrest pack wolves were powerful, yes, but their power was brutal. Obvious, like a hammer. These wolves moved like water, fluid and graceful, and somehow more dangerous for their elegance. They wore dark clothing that whispered of wealth and influence. And at their center walked a man who made Mona's breath catch in her throat. He was tall, taller than the alpha, taller than the beta, with hair the color of midnight, and eyes that seemed to shift between gold and amber as the light caught them. His face was all sharp angles and shadows, beautiful in a way that was almost painful to look at, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had never been afraid of anything in his life. Alpha Forbes. His voice was deep, resonant, filling the great hall without effort. "Thank you for receiving us on such short notice." Alpha Jeffrey descended the stairs with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Alpha Nate Chapman of the Blackmore Pack. Always a pleasure. Though I admit your message was cryptic." Alpha Nate Chapman. Mona had heard whispers of him, the youngest alpha in 3 generations. Rumored to be the most powerful wolf born in a century. The Blackmore Pack was old, ancient even by wolf standards, and they kept to themselves in a way that made other packs nervous. "I prefer to discuss sensitive matters in person," Nate said. "The message I carry is not one for written words." The alpha's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. Let me show you to the council chamber. We can." He stopped. Mona realized, with a jolt of terror, that Nate Chapman was looking directly at her. No, not looking. Staring. His golden eyes had locked onto her crouched form with an intensity that made her skin prickle and her heart race. Something flickered across his face, surprise, confusion, and something else she couldn't name. "Who is that?" he asked quietly. Alpha Forbes followed his gaze, and his expression curdled with distaste. "No one of consequence. A wolfless servant. Property, actually." He snapped his fingers. "You. Back to the kennels." Now, Mona scrambled to her feet, keeping her head bowed, but she could feel Nate Chapman's eyes on her as she hurried toward the servants' corridor. Wait. The single word stopped her like a physical force. Nate descended 2 steps, his gaze never leaving her face. "Look at me." It was a command, infused with the power of an alpha. Mona's body obeyed before her mind could protest. her chin lifting, her eyes meeting his. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Something was happening inside Mona, something she'd never felt before. A warmth spreading through her chest, a vibration in her blood, a sense of recognition that made no logical sense. The hollow space behind her ribs, the place where her wolf should have been, suddenly didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like something was pressing against it from the inside, trying to get out. Interesting, Nate murmured, so quietly that Mona barely heard him. Then he turned back to Alpha Forbes as if nothing had happened. The council chamber, you said? Lead the way. The delegation swept past. And Mona stood frozen in their wake, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. What had just happened? Why had he looked at her like that, like he could see something no one else could see? And why, for the first time in 9 years, did she feel like she wasn't alone inside her own skin? She didn't make it to the kennels. Vicky intercepted her in the servants' corridor, flanked by 2 of her usual followers, Sarah Larson and Bethany Gay, wolves whose personalities had been entirely consumed by their devotion to the future Luna. Well, Vicky purred, blocking Mona's path. Trying to get the attention of the Blackmore Alpha? I saw the way you looked at him, Wolfless. As if someone like you could ever— I didn't, Mona started. The slap cracked across her face before she could finish, snapping her head to the side. Did I say you could speak? Vicky's voice had gone cold. Did I give you permission to open your pathetic mouth? Mona tasted blood. She'd bitten her tongue. You are nothing, Vicky hissed, grabbing Mona's hair and yanking her head back. You are less than nothing, and if I ever catch you so much as looking at a wolf of Alpha Chapman's status again, I will personally carve out your eyes and feed them to the dogs you sleep with. Do you understand me? Yes, Mona whispered. Yes, what? Yes, ma'am. Vicky released her with a shove that sent Mona stumbling into the wall. Get out of my sight. And pray to whatever goddess you think might listen that I don't remember this conversation tomorrow. She swept away with her followers, leaving Mona slumped against the cold stone, her cheek throbbing, her mind reeling. But even through the pain, even through the humiliation, Mona couldn't shake the memory of golden eyes meeting hers. The warmth in her chest hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. That night, in the darkness of her cell, Mona dreamed for the first time in years. She stood in a forest of silver trees beneath a moon so full and bright, it seemed to fill the entire sky. The air smelled of snow and pine and something sweeter, something that made her want to run, to hunt, to howl. And she wasn't alone. A wolf stood before her. Not a normal wolf, this creature was massive, larger than any wolf she'd ever seen, with fur the color of fresh snow and eyes that burned like captured moonlight. You've been waiting, the wolf said, though its mouth didn't move. The words appeared directly in Mona's mind, ancient and powerful and achingly familiar. We've been waiting. Who are you? Mona whispered. The wolf stepped closer, and Mona felt no fear, only a sense of homecoming so profound it brought tears to her eyes. I am you, the wolf said. I am what you were always meant to be. And soon, very soon, they will all see. The wolf opened its jaws and let out a howl that shook the silver forest to its roots. Mona woke gasping, her hand pressed against her chest where her heart was beating wild and fast. The hollow space didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt full, and somewhere in the distance, she could have sworn she heard an answering howl. Chapter 3, The Visitor in the Dark. 3 days after the Blackmore delegation arrived, Mona learned why they had come. She was emptying chamber pots in the East Wing, a task so degrading that even the other servants avoided it when she heard voices drifting from the Alpha's study. The door was slightly ajar, and Mona knew she should keep moving, should pretend she'd heard nothing. But something made her stop. Something made her listen. The prophecy is clear. Nate Chapman's voice, low and urgent. A white Luna will rise from the ashes of rejection. She will unite the packs or destroy them. The signs are aligning, Jeffrey. The blood moon approaches. Prophecies. Alpha Forbes's voice dripped with contempt. Fairy tales told by old wolves with nothing better to do. The Silvercrest Pack doesn't make decisions based on children's stories. This isn't a story. The Council of Elders has confirmed it. A white Luna, a wolf with pure white fur, hasn't been born in over 1,000 years. They're creatures of immense power, directly blessed by the moon goddess herself. And according to the ancient texts, one will emerge soon. Here, in this territory. A heavy silence followed. You think the White Luna is in my pack? Alpha Forbes laughed, but there was an edge to it. Impossible. I know every wolf under my command. Their bloodlines, their abilities, their wolves. There's no one. What about the wolfless ones? Mona's heart stopped. The what? The woman on the stairs. The one you called property. Nate's voice had gone dangerously soft. Who is she? Where did she come from? She's no one. A defect. Her grandmother was a healer who lived at the edge of our territory, probably had human blood somewhere in the line. The girl never shifted. No wolf. No worth. No mystery. And her parents? Another pause. Longer this time. Unknown, Alpha Forbes admitted. The grandmother never spoke of them. The girl was simply there. We took her in out of charity when the old woman died. Charity. The word was flat, disbelieving. She's been tested, Chapman. Multiple times. We brought in specialists when she failed to shift at 13, then again at 15, then at 18. They all said the same thing, no wolf. Whatever broke in her bloodline, it broke completely. And yet, Nate said slowly, when I looked at her, I felt something. A power. Dormant. Buried. But unmistakably there. My wolf recognized it even if she doesn't. Mona pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself. Her head was spinning, her chest tight with something that might have been hope or might have been terror. Your wolf was mistaken, Alpha Forbes said firmly. The girl is defective, nothing more. Perhaps. Nate didn't sound convinced. But with your permission, I'd like to observe her. Speak with her. If there's even a chance she's connected to the prophecy. Absolutely not. The sharpness of the refusal made Mona flinch. She is pack property, Alpha Forbes continued, his voice hard as iron. She exists to serve, not to be observed by visiting alphas who've read too many old books. The Silvercrest pack welcomed you as a guest and an ally, Chapman, but there are limits. The wolfless girl is one of them. A long, tense silence stretched between them. Very well, Nate said finally. I apologize if I overstepped. The prophecy has made me vigilant. Perhaps too vigilant. Understandable. The blood moon makes us all a bit paranoid. Alpha Forbes's voice warmed slightly. Come, let's discuss the real reason for your visit, the border disputes with the northern packs. I believe we can reach an arrangement that benefits us both. Footsteps approached the door. Mona ran. She didn't stop until she reached the kennels, her lungs burning, her mind racing. A prophecy. A white Luna. Power that even an alpha could sense. It couldn't be her. It couldn't. She was wolfless, broken, less than nothing. Every test, every specialist, every full moon spent hoping and praying while nothing happened, they all confirmed what she'd always known. She had no wolf. But the dream. The white wolf in the silver forest. The voice that had spoken directly into her soul. I am you. I am what you were always meant to be. Mona sank onto her concrete bed, her hands trembling. What if the specialists were wrong? What if her wolf wasn't absent, just hidden? Buried so deep that ordinary tests couldn't find it? What if she wasn't broken at all? The thought was too big, too terrifying, too hopeful to hold. She pushed it away, locked it in the same dark corner where she kept all the dreams she'd stopped allowing herself to have. It didn't matter what Alpha Chapman thought he sensed. It didn't matter what the prophecy said. She was Mona Schultz, wolfless servant, pack property. Tomorrow she would wake up and scrub floors and endure Vicky's cruelty and survive another day. That was all she could do. That was all she'd ever been able to do. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The next morning, Mona was summoned to the pack house, not for cleaning duty, but for something far more unusual. The Alpha wants you in the Great Hall, the guard told her, his expression somewhere between confusion and contempt. Don't ask me why. Just move. The Great Hall was the ceremonial heart of the Silvercrest pack, a vast chamber with vaulted ceilings and walls lined with the banners of allied packs. Mona had cleaned it 100 times, but she'd never stood in its center. She stood there now, surrounded by wolves. Alpha Forbes sat on his carved wooden throne, Beta Robert at his right hand. Vicky stood beside her mother Marion Vega, the current Luna, her beautiful face arranged in an expression of innocent curiosity that didn't reach her calculating eyes. And there, standing apart from the Silvercrest wolves like a shadow among candles, was Nate Chapman. His gaze found hers immediately. Mona looked away, her heart hammering. "Mona Schultz." Alpha Forbes's voice echoed through the hall. "Do you know why you've been brought here?" "No, Alpha." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Speak up, girl." "We're not all blessed with wolf hearing." A ripple of laughter moved through the assembled wolves. Mona felt her cheeks burn. "No, Alpha," she repeated, louder. "I've received a request." The Alpha's lip curled around the word. "Alpha Chapman has asked to observe you, to determine whether you might be connected to some ancient prophecy his pack is invested in." He leaned forward, his amber eyes boring into her. "I told him it was a waste of time. You are wolfless. Worthless. Whatever power he thinks he sensed in you is a figment of his imagination." Mona said nothing. There was nothing safe to say. However, Alpha Forbes leaned back. "Alpha Chapman is a valuable ally, and I am not without generosity. So I've agreed to a compromise. Tonight, at moonrise, you will be tested again, publicly. If you fail to shift, as we all know you will, the matter will be settled permanently, and Alpha Chapman will accept that his instincts were wrong." Mona's blood ran cold. A public test. In front of everyone. Every wolf in the Silvercrest pack watching as she stood beneath the full moon and failed. Again, to produce a wolf that didn't exist. The humiliation would be absolute. And if she succeeds? Nate's voice cut through the murmuring crowd. Alpha Forbes laughed. "She won't. But if she does." The two alphas locked eyes. Something passed between them, a challenge, a negotiation, a battle of wills, compressed into a single look. "If she shifts," Alpha Forbes said slowly, "I will release her from her debt. She'll be free to leave Silvercrest territory and never return." "But it won't happen, Chapman. I've watched this girl fail for 9 years. One more test won't change what she is." "Then you have nothing to lose," Nate said smoothly. The Alpha's jaw tightened. "Tonight, moonrise, the testing grounds behind the pack house." He waved a dismissive hand. "Take her back to the kennels until then. And someone get her something to wear that isn't covered in filth. If she's going to embarrass herself in front of 3 packs, she can at least do it looking presentable." Guards grabbed Mona's arms and dragged her away. As she passed Nate Chapman, his hand brushed against hers so briefly it might have been accidental, but the jolt that shot through her at the contact was anything but accidental. It was electricity. It was recognition. It was her entire body screaming a single word that her mind couldn't quite translate. And in the depths of her chest, in that space that had been hollow for so long, something stirred. Something that felt like waking up. The hours until moonrise passed in a blur. Mona was given a simple white dress cotton, plain but clean. A servant she didn't recognize washed her hair and scrubbed the worst of the grime from her skin. No one spoke to her. No one explained what the test would actually involve. She'd been through this before, after all. Everyone knew how it worked. You stood beneath the full moon. You opened yourself to its light. You called to your wolf. And either your wolf answered, or it didn't. For 9 years, Mona's wolf had never answered. But the dream, a voice whispered in her mind. The white wolf. The feeling when Alpha Chapman touched your hand. Something is different now. Something has changed. She crushed the hope before it could fully form. Hope was dangerous. Hope was a weapon the world used against you. Hope was the voice that said maybe this time, right before reality reminded you that some things never changed. She would stand beneath the moon. She would fail. And then she would return to the kennels and serve out the rest of her miserable existence until her body gave out. That was her future. That was all she deserved. The testing grounds were an ancient stone circle at the edge of the forest, worn smooth by centuries of paws and feet. Torches ringed the perimeter, their flames casting dancing shadows across the assembled wolves. And there were so many wolves. The entire Silvercrest pack had turned out, plus the visiting Blackmore delegation, plus wolves from at least 2 other allied packs. Hundreds of eyes, all fixed on Mona as she was led into the center of the circle. The moon hung low on the horizon, moments from rising fully above the tree line. Quite the audience for a failure, Vicky murmured as Mona passed her. Try not to cry too much, Wolfless. It's pathetic when you cry. Mona didn't respond. She walked to the center of the circle and stood alone, the white dress billowing slightly in the evening breeze. Alpha Forbes stepped forward. We gather tonight to witness a test of blood and moon, he announced, his voice carrying across the clearing. Mona Schultz has been called to prove her wolf, or confirm its absence. By the laws of our ancestors, she will stand beneath the full moon and open herself to its light. If a wolf emerges, she earns her freedom. If not, he smiled thinly, she returns to her rightful place. The crowd murmured its approval. Alpha Forbes turned to Mona. You may begin when the moon clears the trees. And girl? Mona looked up. Don't embarrass yourself more than necessary. Accept what you are. He stepped back, rejoining the circle of observers. Mona stood alone in the center, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The moon rose. Silver light spilled across the clearing, washing over Mona like water. She closed her eyes and did what she'd done 100 times before, reached inward, searched for the wolf that should have been there. Called out into the emptiness of her own soul. Please, she thought. If you're there, if you've ever been there, please, answer me. Silence. Familiar. Terrible silence. The seconds stretched into minutes. Mona kept her eyes closed, kept reaching, kept hoping, even though hope had never done anything but hurt her. The crowd began to murmur. She heard whispered laughter, the shuffling of feet, the inevitable sounds of an audience growing bored with a show that had no climax. Enough. Alpha Forbes's voice cut through the night. As expected, Mona. The voice exploded through her mind like thunder. Mona's eyes flew open, and deep inside her, in that space that had been hollow for 22 years, something roared to life. Chapter 4. The Awakening. Pain. Not the familiar pain of bruises and hunger and cold concrete floors. This was something else entirely, a fire that started in Mona's chest and spread outward through her veins like molten silver, consuming everything it touched. She screamed. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the ancient stones, her body convulsing as something inside her fought to break free. The white dress tore at the seams. Her bones cracked, shifted, reformed. Her skin rippled like water disturbed by a stone. The crowd's murmurs turned to gasps. That's impossible. Someone whispered. She's shifting. The wolfless girl is shifting. Mona couldn't hear them, couldn't see them. There was only the pain and the voice, that ancient, powerful voice thundering through her mind like a storm finally breaking after years of building pressure. Yes, the voice roared. At last, let me out. Let me be what we were always meant to be. Another wave of agony crashed through her. Mona's spine arched, her fingers clawing at the stones as they lengthened into something else, as fur erupted across her skin in patches of pure, impossible white. Stop the test. Alpha Forbes's voice cut through the chaos. Something's wrong, this isn't normal. No. Nate Chapman's voice. Calm and certain. This is exactly what I came to see. Let it happen. She's my property. I decide. She's the White Luna. Nate's words fell like hammer blows. And you have no authority over her anymore. Mona heard none of it. She was drowning in transformation, lost in a metamorphosis that should have happened 9 years ago. Every cell in her body was rewriting itself, becoming something new, something more. The hollow space behind her ribs wasn't hollow anymore, it was filled with light, with power, with a presence so vast and ancient it made her previous existence feel like a shadow. The pain peaked, and then, suddenly, it stopped. Mona opened her eyes. The world had changed. Colors were sharper, sounds were clearer, scents painted the air in layers she'd never known existed. She could smell fear waves of it rolling off the assembled wolves. She could hear heartbeats, hundreds of them, racing in terror and awe. She could feel the moon above her like a mother's hand on her brow, warm, welcoming, proud. She looked down at herself and saw paws. Massive, powerful paws covered in fur the color of fresh snow. She was a wolf. She was finally, impossibly, miraculously, a wolf. And not just any wolf. Mona lifted her head, and the crowd recoiled. She was enormous, larger than any wolf in the clearing, larger than Alpha Forbes in his shifted form, larger than any wolf most of them had ever seen. Her fur was pure white, unmarred by any other color, glowing faintly in the moonlight as if she'd swallowed stars. Her eyes, when she opened them fully, burned with silver fire. The white Luna, the prophecy made flesh. For a long moment, no one moved, no one breathed. Then, one by one, the wolves began to kneel. It started at the edges of the crowd, young wolves, omegas, those with the least status and the most to fear. They dropped to their knees as if pulled down by invisible hands. Their heads bowed, their wolves recognizing something their human minds couldn't quite comprehend. The kneeling spread like a wave, moving inward through the ranks. Beta wolves, senior warriors, even the visiting delegates from other packs. Marian Vega, the Luna, fell to her knees with a cry of shock. Vicky tried to resist. Mona could see her fighting it, her face contorted with fury and disbelief, her legs trembling as she struggled against the compulsion. But even Vicky, for all her cruelty and pride, couldn't stand against the presence of a white Luna. She crumpled to the ground, tears of rage streaming down her cheeks. Only 2 wolves remained standing. Alpha Jeffrey Forbes, his face a mask of fury and fear, and Nate Chapman, whose expression held nothing but quiet satisfaction. Impossible, Alpha Forbes breathed. This is impossible. She was tested. She was empty. Nate stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Mona's wolf form. Your tests couldn't find her wolf because her wolf wasn't ready to be found. The white Luna chooses when to emerge. She chose tonight. I don't believe. It doesn't matter what you believe. Nate's voice hardened. The prophecy is fulfilled. A white Luna stands before you. And by the ancient laws older than your pack, older than any pack, she is beyond your authority, beyond anyone's authority. He turned to address the kneeling crowd. The white Luna answers only to the moon goddess herself. Any who seek to harm her, control her, or claim ownership of her, will face the judgment of every pack under the moon. Alpha Forbes's hands clenched into fists. She was my property. She was never your property. Nate's eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising close to the surface. She was a gift you were too blind to recognize. A blessing you treated as a curse. He gestured at the kneeling wolves. Look at your pack, Forbes. Look at them bowing to the girl you kept in kennels. The girl you starved and beat and degraded. How do you think the Council of Alphas will react when they learn how the Silvercrest pack treated the first white Luna in 1,000 years? The blood drained from Alpha Forbes's face. Mona watched all of this through new eyes, wolf eyes, and felt something she'd never felt before. Power. Not the cruel power of dominance and fear that Alpha Forbes wielded. This was something purer. Something that came from within, from the connection to the moon and the ancient magic that flowed through her transformed body. She could feel every wolf in the clearing, their emotions, their loyalties, their secrets. She could sense the genuine submission from most of them, not just fear, but recognition. They knew what she was, even if they couldn't explain it. And she could feel, with crystal clarity, the hatred still burning in a handful of hearts. Vicky, Alpha Forbes, a few of their closest allies. They weren't bowing out of respect. They were bowing because they had no choice. And given the chance, they would destroy her. They cannot touch you, her wolf said, and Mona realized with a start that she could communicate with this presence now, could hear it as clearly as her own thoughts. They are nothing. You are the white Luna. You are chosen. I don't know what that means, Mona thought back. You will learn. We will learn together. But first you must speak. They need to hear your voice. Mona had never shifted before. She didn't know how to shift back. But somehow her body knew. The transformation was gentler this time, a flowing, liquid sensation rather than the violent eruption of before. Fur receded. Bones reformed. In moments, Mona stood in the center of the circle once more, human and whole, but not the same. Her hair, once mousy brown, was now pure white, cascading down her back like a waterfall of moonlight. Her eyes, once a forgettable hazel, burned with silver fire. Even her skin seemed to glow faintly, as if the moon's light had soaked into her very pores. She was still Mona, but she was also something more. Stand, she said. Her voice came out differently, resonant, layered, carrying the weight of authority she'd never possessed before. The kneeling wolves rose instantly. their movements synchronized as if controlled by a single will. Mona turned to face Alpha Forbes, the man who had ordered her whipped, who had sent her to the kennels, who had called her property and defect and less than nothing. He looked small now, old and afraid and desperately trying to hide it. "You told me to accept what I am," Mona said quietly. "I believe I finally have. Listen to me." Alpha Forbes's voice shook slightly. "Whatever you've become, whatever this is, it doesn't change the fact that you've lived under my protection for years. I took you in when you had no one. I gave you food, shelter. You gave me a cell." Mona's voice didn't rise, but the temperature in the clearing seemed to drop. "You gave me scraps and scars and a lifetime of being told I was worthless. Don't mistake cruelty for generosity, Alpha. I remember every blow, every humiliation, every night I spent wondering if I'd survive until morning. I didn't know what you were. Would it have mattered?" The question hung in the air. Alpha Forbes opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He had no answer. Because they both knew the truth. Even if he'd known what Mona would become, he wouldn't have treated her differently. Kindness wasn't in his nature. Power was the only language he understood, and until tonight, Mona had possessed none. "I'm leaving," Mona said. "I'm walking out of this territory, and I am never coming back. You can't stop me. You can't follow me. And if you ever try to claim authority over me again, I will return. And I will make sure the entire wolf world knows exactly how the Silvercrest Pack treated the White Luna." She turned to Nate Chapman. "You came here looking for me," she said. "Why?" "Because the prophecy speaks of what comes next." Nate's golden eyes held hers. "The blood moon rises in 30 days. When it does, the White Luna must stand before the Council of Alphas and claim her birthright, or the balance between the packs will shatter, and war will consume us all." "My birthright?" "You're not just a White Luna, Mona. You're the White Luna, the one the prophecy has been waiting for." He stepped closer, and Mona felt that electric connection again, stronger now, almost overwhelming. "Your grandmother wasn't just a healer. She was the last guardian of the old bloodline, the line of the first Luna, who walked beside the moon goddess herself." Mona's head spun. "That can't be true." "It is. And in 30 days, you'll need to prove it to the council, or everything your grandmother protected, everything she died to keep secret, will have been for nothing." Behind them, Alpha Forbes made a sound of frustrated rage. "This is insane. You can't just take her, she's free." Nate didn't bother turning around. "You agreed to the terms yourself, Forbes. If she shifted, she earned her freedom. She shifted. She's free." He offered Mona his hand. "Come with me. I'll explain everything. I'll help you understand what you are, and what you need to do." Mona looked at his hand. 30 minutes ago she'd been pack property. A wolfless servant, with no future and no hope. Now she was the White Luna, a creature of prophecy, possibly the descendant of the first Luna herself. It was too much. Too fast. Too impossible. But when she looked back at the Silvercrest Pack, at the kneeling wolves, the furious Alpha, the hatred still burning in Vicky's eyes, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She couldn't stay here. She took Nate's hand. "Please, like this video if you believe Mona deserves this moment, this freedom she's waited her entire life for." "Wait." Vicky's voice cut through the night, sharp and desperate. Mona turned. The golden girl of the Silvercrest Pack stood at the edge of the circle. Her perfect composure finally cracked. Tears streaked her face. Her hands were clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. "You can't just leave," Vicky spat. "You can't just become this thing and walk away like nothing happened. I'm supposed to be Luna. I've trained my entire life. You're nobody. You're nothing." Mona looked at the girl who had tormented her for years. The girl who had poured mop water on her head and threatened to carve out her eyes. The girl who had made every single day a masterpiece of misery. She should have felt rage. Satisfaction. The sweet vindication of finally having power over her abuser. Instead, she felt something unexpected. Pity. "You're right," Mona said softly. "I was nobody. I was nothing. And you made sure I knew it every single day." She paused. "But here's what you never understood, Vicky. Being nothing taught me something being everything never could. It taught me that worth doesn't come from power or beauty or the approval of others. It comes from surviving. From getting up every morning when the world has given you every reason to stay down. From finding light in yourself when everyone around you is trying to snuff it out. Vicky's face twisted. Pretty words from a freak who got lucky. Maybe. Mona shrugged. But I'm walking out of here free, and you're staying behind, knowing that the girl you treated like garbage turned out to be everything you'll never be. She turned away. Goodbye, Vicky. I hope you find whatever it is that's missing inside you. I really do. She walked toward the tree line, Nate Chapman at her side. Behind her, she heard Vicky scream a sound of pure, impotent fury that echoed through the forest and scattered birds from the trees. Mona didn't look back. For the first time in her life, she didn't need to. Chapter 5. The Blackmore Pack. They drove through the night. Nate's SUV ate up the miles of mountain highway while Mona sat in the passenger seat, watching the dark trees blur past and trying to process everything that had happened. She was free. After 9 years of servitude, of beatings and starvation and endless degradation, she was actually free. It didn't feel real. You should try to sleep, Nate said, his eyes fixed on the road. We have a 6-hour drive ahead of us, and the next few days are going to be intense. I don't think I can sleep. Mona's voice sounded strange to her own ears, stronger, clearer, layered with harmonics that hadn't been there before. I don't think I'll ever sleep again. Nate's lips curved in a small smile. The first shift affects everyone differently. Your senses are heightened. Your body is flooded with new hormones. Your wolf is awake and excited. It's overwhelming at first, but you'll adjust. How do you know so much about this? About me? I've been searching for you for 3 years. He glanced at her, his golden eyes reflecting the dashboard lights. The prophecy first came to my pack when I was 22, a vision received by our oldest elder during a blood moon ritual. She saw a white wolf rising from ashes, a Luna born in shadow who would either unite the packs or destroy them. She saw the Silvercrest territory, though she didn't know it by name. And she saw. He paused. She saw me, standing beside the white Luna, bound to her by something stronger than pack law. Mona's heart stuttered. What does that mean? I don't know yet. The prophecy was fragmented, incomplete. But when I saw you on those stairs when our eyes met, my wolf knew. He recognized you instantly. Nate's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I've never felt anything like it. It was like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. The words hung in the air between them. Mona knew what he was describing. She'd felt it too, that electric recognition, that sense of rightness that defied logic or explanation. But she'd spent too many years being disappointed by hope to trust it now. You don't know me, she said quietly. You know a prophecy. You know what I might become. But you don't know me. You're right. Nate nodded slowly. I know you were treated badly. I know you survived things that would have broken most wolves. I know you showed mercy to someone who deserved none of it. He looked at her again. But you're right. I don't know your favorite color or what makes you laugh or what you dream about when you actually manage to sleep. And I'd like to learn those things. If you'll let me. Mona didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever wanted to know her before. Not the real her, not the person beneath the servant's uniform and the wolfless shame. She turned back to the window and watched the darkness flow past. The Blackmore Pack territory was nothing like Silvercrest. Where Silvercrest had been all harsh angles and brutal efficiency, Blackmore was something out of a fairy tale. Ancient forests of oak and pine gave way to rolling meadows dotted with wildflowers. A river wound through the heart of the territory, its waters silver in the pre-dawn light. And at the center of it all, perched on a hill overlooking a pristine lake, stood the Blackmore Pack House. It wasn't a lodge or a fortress. It was a castle. Gray stone walls rose 4 stories high, covered in ivy and crowned with towers that seemed to touch the lightning sky. Warm light glowed from dozens of windows, and as the SUV approached, Mona could see wolves moving along the parapet's sentries, she realized, keeping watch over their territory. This is your home, she breathed. This is your home now too, if you want it to be. Nate pulled the SUV to a stop at the base of the main steps. No pressure. No obligations. You're a guest here, Mona. A guest and an equal. Whatever the prophecy says, whatever my wolf feels, you don't owe me or my pack anything." He said it like he meant it, and somehow, impossibly, Mona believed him. The next 3 days passed in a blur of revelations. Nate introduced her to his pack, 200 wolves who treated her with a respect she'd never experienced before. They didn't kneel or grovel, but they inclined their heads when she passed, met her eyes with genuine warmth, made space for her at tables and in conversations, as if she'd always belonged there. It was disorienting. It was wonderful. It was absolutely terrifying. "You're handling this remarkably well," said Leah Spencer, the Blackmore Pack's head healer, during one of their many conversations. She was a small woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, and she'd taken Mona under her wing from the moment of her arrival. "Most wolves would be a mess after everything you've been through." "I'm a mess," Mona admitted. "I'm just good at hiding it." Leah smiled sadly. "That's a skill you learned at Silvercrest, I imagine. You won't need it here. We encourage messes in the Blackmore Pack. It's how we know someone's being honest." She wasn't the only one who made Mona feel welcome. There was Gary Clay, the elderly beta who had served Nate's father before him, whose gruff exterior hid a surprisingly gentle heart. There was Charlotte Collier, the young warrior who had been assigned as Mona's personal guard, not to keep her prisoner, but to keep her safe. And there was Leo Potts, the pack's historian, who had devoted his life to studying the old prophecies, and who looked at Mona like she was a treasure he'd spent decades searching for. The White Luna bloodline was thought to be extinct, Leo explained during one of their sessions in the pack library, a vast room filled with books and scrolls dating back centuries. The last confirmed White Luna died 800 years ago, during the War of Silver Tears. She sacrificed herself to seal a rift between our world and the Shadow Realm, and her line was believed to have ended with her. But it didn't, Mona said. Apparently not. Leo's eyes gleamed with scholarly excitement. Your grandmother must have been a direct descendant, a hidden branch of the family tree that survived in secret. The healers who lived at the edges of pack territories, away from politics and power struggles, they were perfect for hiding such a bloodline. Why hide it at all? Leo's expression grew grave. Because the White Luna is dangerous, child. Not just to enemies, but to the established order. The prophecy speaks of uniting the packs, but it also speaks of judgment. The White Luna has the power to strip an alpha of his wolf, to dissolve pack bonds, to remake the entire hierarchy of our kind. There are wolves who would kill to control such power, and wolves who would kill to ensure no one ever does. The word sent a chill down Mona's spine. Is that why my grandmother never told me what I was? I suspect she hoped the power would never manifest. That you could live a normal life, free from the burdens of prophecy. Leo sighed. But the moon goddess had other plans. She always does. On the evening of the third day, Nate found Mona on the castle's highest balcony, watching the sun set over the lake. You've been avoiding me, he said, coming to stand beside her. I've been processing. Mona didn't look at him. There's a lot to process. Fair enough. He was quiet for a moment. The Council of Alphas has been notified of your emergence. They've agreed to convene on the Blood Moon 3 weeks from now to witness your claim to the White Luna birthright. What exactly does that involve? 3 trials. Nate leaned against the balcony railing. The trial of blood, to prove your lineage. The trial of spirit, to prove your connection to the moon goddess. And the trial of truth, to prove your worth as a leader. And if I fail, then the prophecy remains unfulfilled. The packs continue as they are fractured, suspicious, constantly on the edge of war. He paused, and the Shadow Wolves will see it as their opportunity to strike. Shadow Wolves? Nate's jaw tightened. Wolves who have rejected the moon goddess, who have given themselves to darker powers in exchange for strength. They've been growing bolder for decades, testing our borders, corrupting wolves in every pack. The prophecy says the White Luna will either unite us against them or her failure will give them the opening they need to destroy us all. Mona closed her eyes. Every time she thought she understood the stakes, they got higher. I don't know how to do any of this, she whispered. 3 weeks ago, I was scrubbing toilets. I don't know how to lead packs or face trials or defeat shadow monsters. I don't even know how to be a regular wolf yet. You don't have to know. Nate's hand covered hers on the railing, warm, solid, grounding. You just have to be willing to learn. And you won't be alone. I'll be with you every step of the way. My pack will be with you. Whatever happens at the council, you'll face it with an army at your back." Mona finally looked at him. The setting sun painted his features in gold and amber, softening the sharp angles of his face. His eyes, those impossible golden eyes, held nothing but sincerity. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care so much about someone you just met?" "Because my wolf chose you." The words were simple, unadorned. "From the moment I saw you, he's been certain. You're his mate. His Luna. His other half." Nate's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I know that probably sounds insane to you. I know you have no reason to trust me or my wolf's instincts, but I'm asking you to give me a chance to earn that trust. To prove that what I feel is real, not just prophecy or instinct, but something true. Mate." The word resonated through Mona's entire being. Her wolf still new, still strange, but undeniably hers stirred with recognition. "He speaks the truth," her wolf said. "Can you not feel it? The bond is already forming. It has been since the moment your eyes met." Mona could feel it, a thread of light connecting her heart to his, growing stronger with every moment they spent together. But she'd been hurt too many times to trust feeling alone. "I need time," she said. "Everything is happening so fast. The shift, the prophecy, the council, and now." She gestured between them. "I can't just accept a mate bond when I barely know who I am anymore." "Then take time." Nate squeezed her hand gently and released it. "Take all the time you need. The bond will wait." "I will wait." He stepped back. "But Mona, whatever you decide about us, please know that my protection, my pack's protection, it's not contingent on your answer. You're the White Luna. You deserve safety and respect regardless of whether you ever return my feelings." He turned to leave. "Nate." He stopped. "Thank you," Mona said softly. "For finding me, for believing in me when no one else did, for giving me a chance to be something other than a victim." His smile was like sunrise. "You were never a victim, Mona. You were a survivor. There's a difference." He nodded toward the darkening sky. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start your training. And I promise you, by the time the blood moon rises, you're going to know exactly who you are." He disappeared into the castle, leaving Mona alone with the stars and the stirring of something that felt dangerously like hope. But hope, as Mona had learned long ago, was never safe. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the Blackmoor borders, eyes were watching, waiting, planning, because the emergence of the White Luna hadn't gone unnoticed. And there were wolves wrapped in shadow, wolves who had traded their souls for power, who would do anything to ensure the prophecy was never fulfilled. The hunt was about to begin. Chapter 6: Training and Treachery. Training, Mona discovered, was brutal. Not cruel, never cruel, not like Silvercrest, but demanding in ways that pushed her body and mind to their absolute limits. Every morning began before dawn with Charlotte Collier pounding on her door. "Up, Luna. The moon doesn't wait for sleepyheads." Charlotte was relentless. She ran Mona through combat drills until her muscles screamed, taught her to track scents through miles of forest, showed her how to use her wolf's heightened senses to read the emotions and intentions of those around her. "Your wolf is ancient," Charlotte explained during one of their sparring sessions. "She carries knowledge in her blood that other wolves spend lifetimes learning. You just need to access it." "How do I do that?" "Stop thinking." Charlotte swept Mona's legs out from under her for the 15th time that hour. "Your human brain wants to analyze, plan, strategize, but your wolf already knows what to do. Trust her." It was harder than it sounded. For 22 years, Mona had survived by thinking, by anticipating cruelty, by planning escape routes, by staying 3 steps ahead of those who wished her harm. Letting go of that control felt like stepping off a cliff. But gradually, painfully, she learned. By the end of the first week, she could shift at will, the transformation flowing through her like water instead of tearing through her like fire. By the end of the second week, she could hold her own against Charlotte in combat for nearly 10 minutes before being pinned. By the end of the third week, she could sense the emotions of every wolf within 100 yards, their feelings painting the air in colors only she could see. And through it all, Nate was there. He didn't hover or smother. He gave her space when she needed it, support when she asked for it, and a steady presence that anchored her when the world felt too big and too strange. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told her about his parents, both killed in a shadow wolf attack when he was 17. She told him about her grandmother, about the cottage at the edge of pack territory, where she'd spent the only happy years of her life. He made her laugh with stories of his disastrous early attempts at leadership. She surprised herself by sharing dreams she'd never spoken aloud. The mate bond grew stronger with each passing day. Mona could feel it now, a golden thread connecting her heart to his, warm and constant and impossibly right. She still hadn't accepted it formally, still hadn't spoken the words that would seal them together forever, but she was starting to believe she might. The attack came on the 18th day. Mona was in the library with Leo Potts, studying the ancient texts that described the 3 trials, when the warning howls split the night. Shadow wolves! Someone screamed from the courtyard. They're at the eastern border. Mona was on her feet before she consciously decided to move, her wolf surging to the surface with a snarl of protective fury. "Stay here," Leo urged, his weathered face pale with fear. "The warriors will handle it." "No." The word came out layered with power, with the authority of the white Luna that Mona was only beginning to understand. "Show me where." She ran. Through the castle corridors, down the great stairs, across the moonlit courtyard where wolves were already shifting and streaming toward the eastern woods. Charlotte appeared at her side, fully transformed, her gray fur bristling with battle readiness. "This way." Charlotte's voice echoed in Mona's mind, another skill she'd learned, the mental communication that bonded wolves shared. "Stay close to me." They plunged into the forest. The sounds of battle reached them, first snarls and screams and the terrible wet sounds of teeth meeting flesh. Then the smell hit Mona like a wall, blood, fear, and something else, something wrong, a corruption that made her wolf recoil in instinctive disgust. Shadow wolves. She saw them through the trees, wolves that looked like they'd been dipped in liquid darkness. Their fur absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Their eyes burned with crimson fire. And when they moved, shadows trailed behind them like cloaks of living night. There were dozens of them. The Blackmoor warriors fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. As Mona watched, a massive shadow wolf tore through 2 defenders and lunged for a third, a young wolf, barely more than a pup, who had frozen in terror. Mona didn't think. She shifted. Her white wolf exploded from her human form and crossed the distance in 3 bounds, slamming into the shadow wolf with enough force to send them both tumbling. The creature's wrongness burned against her fur, its very presence an assault on her senses, but Mona's wolf was ancient and powerful and furious. She tore into the shadow wolf with claws and teeth, channeling instincts she didn't know she possessed. The creature screamed a sound that wasn't quite animal and wasn't quite human, and dissolved into wisps of darkness that scattered on the wind. For a heartbeat, the battle paused. Every wolf, shadow and Blackmoor alike, turned to stare at the massive white wolf standing in the moonlight, her fur glowing like captured starfire. Then Mona threw back her head and howled. The sound that emerged wasn't just a howl. It was a command, a declaration, a wave of pure lunar power that crashed over the battlefield like a tidal surge. The Blackmoor wolves felt their strength double. Their wounds begin to close, their wolves surge with borrowed might. The shadow wolves felt something very different. They screamed as the white Luna's power touched them, the pure moonlight burning through their corruption like acid through silk. Some fled, dissolving into the darkness from which they'd come. Others stood frozen, unable to move as the Blackmoor warriors fell upon them. In minutes, it was over. The shadow wolves were gone, destroyed or scattered, and the Blackmoor pack stood victorious among the trees. Maid appeared at Mona's side, his black wolf pressing against her white flank. "Are you hurt?" "No." Mona was trembling, the adrenaline still coursing through her transformed body. "What was that?" "What did I do?" "You saved us." His mental voice was filled with wonder. "You channeled the moon's power directly. I've never seen anything like it." Neither had anyone else, apparently. As Mona shifted back to human form, she found herself surrounded by wolves who looked at her with something approaching reverence. "The White Luna," someone whispered. "She destroyed them with a single howl. The prophecy is true. She's really the one." Mona didn't feel like a prophecy. She felt exhausted, overwhelmed, and vaguely nauseated from the lingering corruption of the shadow wolves. But she also felt something else. Purpose. For the first time in her life, she'd used her power to protect instead of merely survive. She'd stood between innocent wolves and darkness, and she'd won. Maybe she could do this after all. The celebration that night was subdued, but genuine. Wolves who had been injured were tended in the healing halls. Those who had fallen 3, in total, were mourned with howls that echoed across the territory. And those who remained gathered in the great hall to share food and stories and the simple comfort of pack. Mona sat beside Nate at the head table, acutely aware of the eyes that kept drifting to her. "They're looking at me like I'm a goddess," she murmured. "To them, you might as well be." Nate's hand found hers beneath the table. "What you did tonight. It's the stuff of legends. The power you displayed hasn't been seen since the last white Luna walked the earth. I didn't even know I could do it. That's what makes it more impressive. Imagine what you'll be capable of when you actually know what you're doing." Despite everything, Mona laughed. It felt strange, good strange, like a muscle she'd forgotten she had. "Alpha Nate." Gary Clay approached the table, his weathered face grave. "We've finished questioning the shadow wolf we captured." Mona sat up straighter. "You captured one?" "Barely. The creature was dying from your howl, but we managed to keep it alive long enough to extract information." The beta's eyes flickered to Mona. "You'll want to hear this, Luna." They followed Gary to the castle's lower levels, to a cell reinforced with silver bars and lined with protective runes. Inside, chained to the wall with blessed iron, was a wolf, or what was left of one. The shadow corruption had been burned away by Mona's power, leaving behind something pitiful, a gaunt figure with haunted eyes and patchy fur, trembling in the grip of whatever withdrawal came from losing one's connection to darkness. "Tell them," Gary commanded. "Tell them what you told us." The creature looked up. When it spoke, its voice was a rasp, barely human. "The attack wasn't random. We were sent to test the White Luna's power, to see if the rumors were true." A horrible smile twisted its features. "They're true. You're everything the shadows feared you'd be." "Who sent you?" Nate demanded. "The Shadow Council. But they didn't act alone." The creature's eyes found Mona's, and something like malicious pleasure flickered in their depths. "They have an ally. Someone from your past, White Luna. Someone who hates you more than she fears the darkness." Mona's blood ran cold. "Who?" The creature laughed, a wet, broken sound. "The Golden One. The one who should have been Luna. She came to us 3 days after you left Silvercrest, offering everything she knew about you in exchange for power." The smile widened. "She's been feeding us information ever since. Your training schedule, your weaknesses, the layout of this castle. Vicky had allied with the Shadow Wolves. She has a message for you," the creature continued. She says you stole her destiny, and she's going to take it back. She's going to watch you fail the trials, watch the council reject you, and then she's going to stand over your broken body and finally be the Luna she was always meant to be." The creature dissolved into ash, its borrowed life finally expiring. Mona stood frozen, staring at the empty chains. Vicky, her tormentor, her abuser. The girl who had made every day a masterpiece of misery. Now she was working with shadow wolves. Now she was feeding them information, helping them plan attacks, actively trying to destroy the White Luna before she could fulfill the prophecy. And the blood moon was only 11 days away. "She knows the castle," Charlotte said grimly during the emergency council that followed. "She knows our patrol routes, our defensive positions, our training schedule. If she's been feeding the Shadow Council information, then they know everything we know," Gary finished. "And they'll use it against us at the trials." "Can we postpone?" Leah asked. "Ask the Council of Alphas for more time?" "No." Nate's voice was flat. "The blood moon only rises once every 7 years. If we miss this chance, we wait another 7 years, and the Shadow Wolves grow stronger every day. We can't give them that kind of time." All eyes turned to Mona. She stood at the window, staring out at the moon that seemed to pulse with light only she could see. Her mind was racing, calculating, planning all the skills she'd learned at Silvercrest, all the survival instincts that had kept her alive through years of abuse. "Then we change what she knows," Mona said quietly. "What?" She turned to face the council. "Vicky thinks she knows me. She thinks I'm still the scared, broken girl she tormented for years. She thinks she can predict what I'll do, how I'll react, where I'll be weak." Mona's eyes began to glow with soft silver light. So we show her someone different. We change the training. We alter the schedules. We give her false information and let her think she's winning. A trap, Nate said slowly. You want to use yourself as bait. I want to use her arrogance against her. She's so convinced I'm nothing that she'll never see me coming. Mona smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression that would have been impossible 3 weeks ago. I spent 9 years learning to survive Vicky Horn. It's time to put those lessons to use. The council exchanged glances. Then, one by one, they nodded. 11 days, Gary said. 11 days to prepare a trap, master the trials, and outmaneuver enemies who've been planning this for centuries. Then we'd better get started, Mona replied. And somewhere in her chest, her wolf howled with anticipation. The hunt was on. Chapter 7. The Eve of Trials. The days blurred together in a whirlwind of preparation. Mona trained harder than ever. But now her sessions were held in secret locations, abandoned ruins in the northern forests, hidden caves beneath the mountains, anywhere Vicky's spies couldn't follow. Meanwhile, the original training grounds hosted elaborate performances, fake sessions designed to feed Vicky exactly the information they wanted her to have. She thinks you're struggling with the trial of spirit, Charlotte reported, after intercepting a shadow wolf messenger. Her sources say you can't maintain your connection to the moon goddess for more than a few seconds. In truth, Mona had spent 3 hours the previous night in deep communion with the lunar presence, learning secrets about her bloodline that Leo Potts had never found in any book. Good, Mona said. Let her think I'm weak, let her think she's winning. It was strange, this new version of herself. The scared servant who flinched at shadows was still there, buried deep, but she was no longer in control. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had looked at the worst the world could offer and decided to fight back, someone who was finally ready to claim her destiny. 6 days before the blood moon, Leo Potts made a discovery that changed everything. I found it, he announced, bursting into Nate's study where Mona and the Alpha were reviewing council protocols. I found the missing piece of the prophecy. He spread an ancient scroll across the desk, parchment so old it seemed to crumble at the edges, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. This was hidden in the archives of the first pack, Leo explained breathlessly. The pack that existed before all others, founded by the moon goddess herself. It speaks of the White Luna's true purpose, not just to unite the packs, but to close the Shadow Gate forever. The Shadow Gate? Nate frowned. I thought that was a myth. So did I. But according to this text, the gate is real, a rift between our world and the realm of eternal darkness. It's been sealed for 1,000 years, but the seal is weakening. That's why the shadow wolves have been growing stronger. They're drawing power from the opening cracks. Mona studied the scroll, her wolf translating the ancient symbols with knowledge that seemed to come from somewhere beyond memory. It says the White Luna's blood is the key, she said slowly. That only the direct descendant of the first Luna can seal the gate permanently or open it completely. Which is why the Shadow Council wants you dead, Leo confirmed. Or worse, corrupted. If they could turn a White Luna to their cause, they wouldn't need to break the seal. They could simply command you to open it. The implications settled over them like a shroud. Vicky, Mona breathed. She's not just trying to stop me from completing the trials. She's trying to deliver me to the Shadow Council. That's why she's been feeding them information. She wants them to capture me, not kill me. The ultimate revenge, Nate said grimly. She can't be Luna herself, so she'll make sure you become something far worse. Mona's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, just a moment, she felt the old fear creeping back. The voice that whispered she wasn't strong enough, wasn't good enough, would never be anything but the broken girl who scrubbed floors and slept with dogs. Then she remembered the howl that had shattered shadow wolves. She remembered the pack that had knelt before her. She remembered who she was becoming. Then we make sure she fails, Mona said, her voice steady as stone. We complete the trials. We seal the gate. And we show the Shadow Council that they chose the wrong enemy. 4 days before the blood moon, Nate took Mona to a place he'd never shown anyone. It was a clearing deep in the oldest part of the forest, where the trees grew so thick their branches wove together into a living cathedral. Moonlight filtered through the leaves in silver streams, and the air hummed with an energy that made Mona's skin tingle. This is where my parents are buried, Nate said quietly. The shadow wolves killed them here, during an attack I should have been present for. I was 17, away at a training camp, and by the time I got back, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Mona took his hand. I come here when I need to remember why I fight, he continued. When the weight of being alpha feels like too much. When I start to wonder if any of it matters. He turned to face her. I wanted you to see it. To know this part of me. Because if we're going to face what's coming, I need you to understand this isn't just about prophecy for me. This is personal. It's personal for me too, Mona said. Vicky took years of my life. The Shadow Council wants to take everything else. And I'm done letting people take from me. They stood in silence, hands intertwined, as the moon rose higher above the trees. The mate bond, Mona said finally. I've been thinking about it. Nate went very still. And I'm scared. The admission came easier than she expected. I'm scared that if I accept it, I'll lose myself. That I'll become someone else's Luna, instead of my own person. That all these feelings I'm developing are just the bond, not something real. I understand. Let me finish. She turned to face him fully. I'm scared. But I'm also tired of letting fear make my decisions. My whole life, I've been afraid of pain, of rejection, of hoping for things that might never happen. And where did it get me? A cell in the kennels and a lifetime of regret. She reached up and touched his face, marveling at how natural it felt. I don't know if what I feel is the bond or something else. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the bond exists because there's something real underneath it, something that was always meant to be. She took a breath. I'm not ready to complete the bond. Not yet. But I'm ready to stop running from it. I'm ready to see where this goes. Nate's eyes blazed gold in the moonlight. That's enough, he said softly. That's more than enough. He kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Mona didn't want to pull away. She leaned into him, and the kiss deepened, and the mate bond sang between them like a chord finally finding its harmony. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Mona laughed. What? Nate asked. Nothing. Just 3 weeks ago, I was pack property. Now I'm kissing an alpha in a moonlit forest. She shook her head. My life has gotten very strange. Strange is good. Nate pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like he never intended to let go. Strange is amazing. Strange is everything I've been waiting for. They stayed in the clearing until the moon began to set, talking and kissing and simply being together. For those few hours, there were no trials, no shadow wolves, no vengeful rivals plotting destruction. There was only this. 2 days before the blood moon, the Council of Alphas began to arrive. They came from every corner of the continent, 12 alphas representing the 12 great packs, plus their retinues of advisors, warriors, and witnesses. The Blackmore Castle, vast as it was, could barely contain them all. Mona watched from a balcony as the delegations streamed through the gates. She recognized some from descriptions in Leo's books. Alpha Arnold Newman, of the Ironwood Pack, ancient and scarred, said to have killed 100 shadow wolves with his bare hands. Alpha Brad Moore, of the Coastal Pack, young and ambitious, rumored to be seeking a political marriage to strengthen his position. Alpha Missy Cox of the Southern Pack, the only female alpha on the council, whose piercing eyes seemed to see through every deception. And there, arriving last with a retinue of silver-clad warriors, Alpha Jeffrey Forbes of the Silvercrest Pack. Mona's hands tightened on the balcony railing. He looked older than she remembered. Smaller. The man who had terrorized her for years, who had sent her to the kennels and called her property, now seemed almost diminished, a bully stripped of his power to intimidate. But he wasn't alone. Walking 3 steps behind him, dressed in silver silk that matched her cruel smile, was Vicky Horn. Their eyes met across the courtyard. Vicky's smile widened. I'm coming for you, that smile said. Everything you've built, everything you've become. I'm going to tear it all down. Mona held her gaze without flinching. Try, she thought back. I'm not the girl you remember. And you have no idea what's waiting for you. That night, the council held a formal dinner to welcome the White Luna candidate. Mona wore white, a gown of flowing silk that Charlotte had helped her choose, simple but elegant, designed to evoke the moonlight she now embodied. Her white hair was arranged in an elaborate braid threaded with silver, and her eyes glowed faintly with the power she no longer tried to hide. She was announced at the entrance. Mona Schultz, White Luna candidate, of the bloodline of the First Luna. The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to watch as she descended the stairs, Nate at her side, moving with a grace that 3 weeks of training had burned into her muscles. She felt their scrutiny, some curious, some hostile, some carefully neutral. She felt Alpha Forbes's hatred and Vicky's malice. She felt the weight of centuries of prophecy pressing down on her shoulders. And she didn't falter. She reached the base of the stairs and faced the assembled alphas. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I know many of you are skeptical. A wolfless servant from a minor pack, claiming to be the White Luna of prophecy. It sounds like a fairy tale." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "But I'm not here to convince you with words. Words are easy. Words can lie." She let her eyes drift to Vicky, who stood beside Alpha Forbes with perfect poise. "In 2 days, I'll face the 3 trials. I'll prove my blood, my spirit, and my truth. And when I'm done, you'll have all the evidence you need." "Pretty speech," Alpha Forbes called out. "But some of us remember what you really are, girl. A defect. A burden. A mistake of nature who somehow stumbled into power she doesn't deserve." The hall went deadly quiet. Mona smiled. "You kept me in a cell for a month," she said calmly. "You fed me scraps and called me property. You stood by while your wolves beat me, mocked me, treated me as less than human." She tilted her head. "And yet here I am, standing before the Council of Alphas, preparing to claim a birthright that your entire pack couldn't suppress no matter how hard they tried." She took a step toward him. "So tell me, Alpha Forbes, if I'm so worthless, why are you so afraid of me?" His face purpled with rage, but before he could respond, Alpha Missy Cox spoke. "Enough." Her voice cracked like a whip. "Personal grievances have no place in these proceedings. The candidate will face the trials, and the trials will reveal the truth. Until then, we will conduct ourselves with dignity." Her sharp eyes moved between Mona and Forbes. "All of us." The tension held for a moment longer. Then, Forbes inclined his head stiffly and stepped back. Mona returned to Nate's side, her heart pounding, but her face serene. "Well played." Nate murmured through their mental connection. "I learned from the best," she replied. 9 years of surviving Silvercrest taught me exactly how to handle bullies." The dinner continued, conversations resuming, the moment passing. But Mona caught Vicky's eye one more time across the crowded hall. The false smile was gone now. In its place was something raw, something desperate, and Mona realized, with sudden clarity, that Vicky wasn't just angry. She was terrified. The girl who had tormented her for years was watching her rise and finally understanding that she couldn't stop it. That no one could. The blood moon was coming, and everything was about to change. Chapter 8. The 3 Trials. The blood moon rose like a wound in the sky. Crimson light spilled across the ancient stone amphitheater where the Council of Alphas had gathered to witness the trials. Torches lined the circular arena, their flames dancing in colors that shouldn't exist, silver and gold and deep violet, responding to the sacred magic that saturated the air. Mona stood at the center of it all, dressed in simple white, her hair unbound and flowing like moonlight given form. Around her, 500 wolves watched from the tiered seats. The 12 alphas occupied positions of honor at the cardinal points. Nate stood at the northern edge, his presence a warm anchor in her mind, and at the southern edge, flanked by Silvercrest warriors, sat Alpha Forbes and Vicky, their hatred a cold pressure against her senses. "We gather beneath the blood moon," intoned Elder Wallace Nguyen, the ancient wolf who served as ceremonial master. His voice carried across the amphitheater without effort, amplified by centuries of tradition, to witness the claiming of a birthright unseen for 1,000 years. Mona Schultz, candidate for White Luna, will face the 3 trials. Should she succeed, she will be recognized as the moon goddess's chosen. Should she fail, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Failure meant death. Or worse, rejection by the goddess herself, a fate no wolf had ever survived with their sanity intact. Let the trial of blood begin. The trial of blood. 2 wolves entered the arena carrying an obsidian basin filled with liquid silver. They placed it at Mona's feet and retreated without a word. The trial of blood tests lineage, Elder Wallace explained. The candidate will offer her blood to the moon's mirror. If she carries the bloodline of the first Luna, the mirror will show us truth. If she is false, the liquid in the basin began to bubble ominously. Mona had prepared for this. Leo had explained the mechanics. The silver would read her blood like a book, projecting images of her ancestors for all to see. If her grandmother truly was descended from the first Luna, the evidence would be undeniable. If not, the silver would reject her blood, violently enough to kill. She knelt beside the basin and drew a small knife from her belt. Wait. The shout came from the southern seats. Vicky was on her feet, her face arranged in an expression of concerned innocence. Honored Alphas, I must speak. I have evidence that this woman's blood is corrupted, tainted by human ancestry, that disqualifies her from the trials entirely. Murmurs swept through the crowd. You will have your chance to present challenges after the trials, Elder Wallace said sternly. Not during, but she might contaminate the sacred basin. If her blood is impure, it could damage the moon's mirror beyond repair. Surely the council doesn't want to risk such a precious artifact on a former servant's desperate gamble? More murmurs. Some of the alphas were nodding, their expressions troubled. Mona felt a flash of anger and then, beneath it, cold calculation. This was Vicky's move. She'd known it would come, had planned for some form of interruption. The goal was to delay, to create doubt, to give the Shadow Council's allies time to position themselves. But Vicky had miscalculated. She'd assumed Mona would hesitate, would show fear, would give the council reason to doubt. Instead, Mona smiled. The concerned witness raises valid points, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the amphitheater. The moon's mirror is precious indeed. So let me offer a compromise. She raised the knife to her palm. If my blood is impure, the mirror will reject it instantly. The silver will boil, and I'll be marked as false before any damage can occur. She met Vicky's eyes across the arena. But if my blood is true, well, then we'll all know exactly what I am, and exactly what certain people have been trying so desperately to hide. She drew the blade across her palm before anyone could object. Blood welled up dark at first, then shifting to something luminous, something that glowed with inner light. It dripped into the basin of silver, and the liquid erupted. Not in rejection, in recognition. Images exploded from the surface, ghostly figures projected into the air above the basin, visible to everyone in the amphitheater. A woman with white hair and silver eyes, holding a newborn child. The same woman, older now, standing beside a great white wolf. Generations cascading backward through time, each face distinct, each carrying the unmistakable mark of the bloodline. And then, at the very beginning, a figure that made the entire council gasp. She was beautiful beyond mortal measure, her form half human and half light, her eyes containing galaxies. She stood beside a wolf the size of a mountain, and together they looked out over a world being born. The first Luna, the moon goddess's daughter, the origin of all wolf kind. The image held for a long, breathless moment. Then it faded, and the silver in the basin settled into perfect stillness. The trial of blood is complete, Elder Wallace announced, his voice shaking slightly. The candidate's lineage is confirmed. She carries the blood of the first Luna, unbroken across 1,000 years. The amphitheater erupted in whispers, exclamations, the sounds of wolves struggling to process what they'd witnessed. Mona rose to her feet, her cut palm already healing. She didn't look at Vicky. She didn't need to. The trial of spirit. The second trial began at midnight, when the blood moon hung directly overhead. The trial of spirit tests connection, Elder Wallace intoned. The candidate must open herself to the moon goddess and receive her blessing. If her spirit is worthy, the goddess will answer. If not, he gestured to the arena floor, where scorch marks from previous failed candidates still scarred the ancient stone. Mona walked to the center of the arena and knelt. This was the trial she'd been most uncertain about. Blood was blood, you had it or you didn't. But spirit? Connection to a goddess she'd never consciously spoken to? Trust yourself, Nate's voice whispered through their bond. Trust us. Trust me, her wolf added. I have spoken to the mother since before time had meaning. She knows you. She has always known you. Mona closed her eyes. She reached inward, past the fear, past the doubt, past the scars of 22 years of suffering. She found the core of herself, the light that had survived everything, the hope that refused to die no matter how many times the world tried to extinguish it. And she offered it up. Mother, she thought. I don't know if I'm worthy. I don't know if I can be what the prophecy says. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to fight. I'm willing to give everything I have to protect the wolves who are counting on me. Please, show me what I need to do. For a long moment, nothing happened. The crowd shifted restlessly. Someone coughed. Then the moon blazed. Light poured down from the blood moon, not red anymore, but pure silver, concentrated into a single beam that struck Mona like a physical force. She gasped, her back arching, her arms spreading wide as power beyond comprehension flooded through her. And then she heard the voice. My daughter. It wasn't sound. It was meaning, pure and direct, transmitted straight into her soul. You have suffered much. You have been broken and remade. You have learned what it means to be powerless, and that is why you are worthy to wield power beyond measure. Tears streamed down Mona's face. I give you my blessing. I give you my strength. I give you the authority to speak in my name and act with my will. Rise, White Luna. Rise and claim your destiny. The light intensified until Mona couldn't see, couldn't think, couldn't feel anything but the overwhelming presence of the divine. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. Mona opened her eyes. She was floating, 3 feet above the arena floor, suspended by nothing visible, her white hair swirling around her in an invisible wind. Her skin glowed with soft luminescence. Her eyes burned silver bright. And on her forehead, visible to everyone in the amphitheater, a mark had appeared. A crescent moon, glowing with its own inner light. The mark of the moon goddess is chosen. The trial of spirit is complete, Elder Wallace whispered, and for the first time, the ancient wolf dropped to his knees. The goddess has spoken. The blessing is given. Around the amphitheater, wolves began to kneel. Not from compulsion this time, from choice, from recognition of something sacred standing before them. Even some of the alphas bowed their heads. Mona drifted slowly back to earth, her feet touching stone, the glow fading but the mark remaining. 2 trials down, 1 to go. The trial of truth. The final trial is the most dangerous, Elder Wallace said, and despite everything that had come before, his voice was grave. The trial of truth reveals what is hidden. The candidate will be stripped of all deception, her secrets, her fears, her deepest shames will be laid bare for all to see. If she can withstand this exposure without breaking, she will be proven worthy to lead. If not, he didn't elaborate. Mona understood. This trial wasn't about lineage or divine favor. It was about character. About whether she could stand naked before the world. Every vulnerability exposed. And remain standing. It was, she realized, the trial Vicky had been counting on. Because Vicky knew her secrets, knew her shames, knew every moment of weakness and despair from 9 years of torment. And she was betting that when the world saw the truth of who Mona really was, the scared, broken girl beneath the White Luna's power, they would reject her. Let them see, Mona thought. Let them see everything. She walked to the center of the arena and spread her arms. I'm ready. The magic hit her like a wave. Images exploded around her, memories made visible, projected into the air for all to witness. A child alone in a cottage, watching her grandmother's body cool in the winter light. A teenager scrubbing floors, while other wolves walked past without seeing her. Fists and kicks and cruel laughter. Blood on stone. Nights spent crying in the darkness, wondering why she'd been born at all. The kennels, the cold concrete, the rats and the despair and the endless, crushing loneliness. Every moment of suffering, every instant of shame, every time she'd wanted to give up and simply stop existing. The amphitheater watched in silence. Mona felt them, seeing her, truly seeing her for the first time. Not the White Luna, not the prophecy, just Mona, in all her broken, scarred, imperfect humanity, and she didn't hide. She stood in the center of her own pain and refused to look away. Yes, she thought, this is who I am, this is what made me, Every blow, every insult, every moment of despair, they're part of me, and I'm not ashamed. Because I survived. Because I'm still here. Because they tried to destroy me. And they failed. The memories shifted. New images appeared, images that Mona hadn't consciously chosen to show. A white wolf rising from ashes. A howl that shattered darkness. Hands reaching out to help wounded warriors. A kiss in a moonlit forest. A woman standing before a council of alphas, unafraid. The truth of who she was becoming. The magic released her. And Mona staggered but didn't fall. Elder Wallace stepped forward, his ancient eyes glistening. The trial of truth is complete, he announced. The candidate has shown us her past and her present. Her suffering and her strength. Her wounds and her healing. He turned to face the council. What say the alphas? Is Mona Schultz worthy to bear the title of White Luna? One by one, the alphas rose. Worthy, said Alpha Arnold Newman. Worthy, said Alpha Brad Moore. Worthy, said Alpha Missy Cox, and her voice held something like respect. Around the circle they went, each alpha speaking the same word, until only one remained. Alpha Jeffrey Forbes stood slowly, his face a mask of barely contained fury. The amphitheater held its breath. Worthy, he spat, the word torn from him like a confession extracted under torture, because even he couldn't deny what they'd all witnessed. Even he couldn't reject the moon goddess's chosen. Elder Wallace raised his hands. Then let it be known across all territories, to all packs beneath the moon, Mona Schultz is the White Luna, first in 1,000 years, blessed by the goddess, proven in blood and spirit and truth. The amphitheater erupted in howls. If Mona's journey moved you, if you felt her pain become power, her shame become strength, don't forget to like this video. But even as the howls of celebration echoed through the night, Mona's eyes found Vicky in the crowd. The golden girl wasn't celebrating. She was gone. And so were a dozen Silvercrest warriors. Nate, Mona sent urgently through their bond. Something's wrong. Vicky's disappeared. I know. His mental voice was grim. Charlotte's tracking them. They're heading for the eastern forest toward the old ruins. The Shadow Gate. Yes. Mona's blood ran cold. The trials were complete. She was the White Luna. But Vicky had never intended to win through the council. She'd been planning something else entirely. And whatever it was happening right now. Chapter 9. The Shadow Gate. Mona ran. She shifted mid-stride, her white wolf exploding from her human form as she tore through the eastern forest. Nate ran beside her, his black wolf matching her pace, and behind them came a dozen Blackmore warriors, Charlotte among them, her gray fur bristling with battle readiness. How far? Mona demanded through their bond. The ruins are 2 miles ahead, Nate replied. Charlotte's scouts say Vicky has at least 15 wolves with her, plus something else. Something that doesn't smell like wolf. Shadow creatures. The Shadow Council had sent reinforcements. Can we stop them in time? We have to. They burst through the tree line into a clearing that made Mona's wolf howl with instinctive recognition. The ruins were ancient beyond measure, crumbling stone pillars arranged in a perfect circle, covered in symbols that predated written language. At the center stood an archway of black stone, easily 20 feet tall, its surface carved with images of wolves and moons, and things that existed only in nightmare. The Shadow Gate. And standing before it, her arms raised, her voice chanting words that hurt to hear, was Vicky Horn. She wasn't alone. Shadow wolves flanked her, a dozen of them, their corrupted forms writhing with darkness, and beside her stood a figure that made even Nate's wolf falter. It was massive, 8 feet tall, vaguely humanoid, but composed entirely of living shadow. Its eyes burned with crimson fire, and when it smiled, its mouth was a void filled with stars that had died eons ago. A Shadow Lord. One of the commanders of the darkness itself. Ah, the creature said, its voice like breaking bones. The White Luna arrives. How convenient. We were hoping you'd come. Vicky turned, and Mona barely recognized her. The golden girl's beauty had curdled into something terrible. Black veins crawled beneath her skin. Her eyes flickered between ice blue and crimson, and the smile on her face held nothing human at all. Mona, Vicky purred. So glad you could make it. I wanted you to see this. Wanted you to watch as everything you fought for comes crashing down. Step away from the gate, Vicky. Mona shifted back to human form, the crescent moon on her forehead blazing with silver light. Whatever they've promised you, it's a lie. The Shadow Council doesn't share power. They consume it. Like you consumed mine? Vicky's voice cracked with rage. I was supposed to be Luna. I trained my entire life. And then you a nothing, a defect. You waltz in and take everything. I didn't take anything. The goddess chose. The goddess should have chosen me. The scream echoed through the ruins. And for a moment, Mona saw past the corruption to the broken girl beneath. Vicky wasn't evil. Not at her core. She was desperate. Terrified. So consumed by jealousy and entitlement that she'd let the darkness in, rather than face a world where she wasn't special. It's not too late, Mona said softly. The corruption hasn't fully taken hold. If you stop now, if you step away from the gate, I can help you. We can purge the shadow from your system before it destroys you completely. For a single, trembling moment, something flickered in Vicky's eyes. Doubt. Fear. A ghost of the girl she used to be. Then the Shadow Lord laughed. How touching. The lamb offers mercy to the wolf. It placed one massive hand on Vicky's shoulder, and she shuddered as more darkness flowed into her. But I'm afraid your pet has already made her choice. The gate requires blood to open specifically. The blood of one who has been wronged by the White Luna's line. Our dear Vicky qualifies beautifully. Wronged? Mona stared at Vicky. I never wronged you. I never did anything to you. You were the one who. Your grandmother killed my father. The words hit Mona like a physical blow. What? Vicky's laugh was bitter, broken. You didn't know? Of course you didn't. The mighty healer at the edge of pack territory, so kind, so gentle. She murdered my father when I was 3 years old, ripped his throat out and left him to bleed in the snow. That's impossible. My grandmother would never. He found out what she was. Vicky's voice had gone flat, reciting facts she'd clearly repeated to herself 1,000 times. He discovered she was hiding the White Luna bloodline, and he tried to expose her, so she killed him. And she cursed my mother to silence, bound her tongue, so she could never speak of what she'd seen. The Shadow Lord smiled its void smile. Generational trauma. The best kind. It makes the blood so much more potent. Mona's mind reeled. Her grandmother, the gentle woman who had raised her, who had whispered promises of destiny and hope, a killer. But even as she struggled to process, her wolf spoke. She did what she had to do, her wolf said quietly. To protect you. To protect the bloodline. The man Vicky speaks of, he wasn't innocent. He was a hunter of the old blood, seeking to exterminate the White Luna line forever. Your grandmother defended you the only way she could. How do you know that? Because I was there. Sleeping within her. As I slept within you, I saw through her eyes. He came with silver and fire, and she chose your life over his. Mona closed her eyes. Her grandmother had killed to protect her, had kept secrets to keep her safe, had died without ever telling Mona the truth of what she'd sacrificed. And Vicky had grown up hating a dead woman, her rage carefully cultivated by whoever had told her the story, a version twisted to exclude the context that would have made it understandable. Vicky, Mona said, opening her eyes. I'm sorry about your father. I'm sorry you grew up with that pain. But the story you were told isn't complete. He wasn't just investigating my grandmother, he was trying to kill us. Both of us. She acted in defense of her family, just as you've been acting out of grief for yours. Lies. I'm the White Luna. I just passed the trial of truth. I literally cannot deceive you right now. Mona stepped forward, hands raised. Look at me. Use whatever power the shadows have given you. Read my heart. I'm telling you the truth. Vicky hesitated. The Shadow Lord's grip tightened on her shoulder. Don't listen to her. She's manipulating you, just as her grandmother manipulated everyone. The gate is almost ready. Finish the ritual, and you'll have power beyond anything the White Luna can offer. You'll be a queen of shadows, eternal and unstoppable. I don't want to be a queen of shadows, Vicky whispered, and tears, actual tears, streaming black with corruption traced down her cheeks. I just wanted to matter. I just wanted to be someone. You are someone, Mona said. You've always been someone. You didn't need a title or a prophecy to have worth. None of us do. The clearing held its breath. Then, The Shadow Lord snarled and shoved Vicky toward the gate. Enough of this sentimentality. If she won't complete the ritual willingly. Shadow tendrils erupted from the creature's form, wrapping around Vicky's wrist and dragging a blade across her palm. Blood, human blood, mixed with shadow corruption, sprayed across the black stone archway. The gate began to open. Reality screamed. The archway filled with darkness, not mere absence of light, but something alive and hungry and infinitely malevolent. Shapes moved within it, pressed against the barrier between worlds like prisoners clawing at a window. And the barrier was cracking. No. Mona threw herself forward. The Shadow Lord intercepted her, one massive hand closing around her throat and lifting her off the ground. Did you think it would be that easy? That you could simply talk your way past the end of the world? Its void smile widened. The gate is opening. In moments, the shadow realm will flood through, and everything you love will be consumed. Your pack, your mate, your precious council of alphas. All of it, drowned in eternal darkness. It squeezed. Mona couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The creature's touch burned with cold beyond cold, and she could feel the corruption trying to seep into her, trying to extinguish the moonlight that blazed within her. Mona! Nate's voice screamed through their bond. He launched himself at the Shadow Lord, teeth bared, but the creature batted him aside like an insect. Get up, her wolf commanded. Get up. You are the White Luna. You carry the blood of the first Luna. You have the blessing of the goddess herself. This creature is nothing compared to what you are. I can't. You can. You've survived worse than this. You've survived years of abuse, starvation, beatings, despair. You've survived every attempt to break you. Are you going to let this shadow end you now? After everything you've overcome? No. The word exploded through Mona's entire being. She grabbed the Shadow Lord's wrist with both hands, and she pulled. Moonlight erupted from her skin, not gentle luminescence this time, but a blaze of silver fire that made the creature shriek and release her. She landed on her feet, the crescent moon on her forehead burning like a star, her eyes two pools of liquid silver. You're right, she said, her voice layered with power that wasn't entirely her own. I am the White Luna, and you are going back to the darkness that spawned you. She raised her hand toward the Shadow Lord. The moonlight condensed into a beam of pure radiance that struck the creature in the chest. It screamed a sound that echoed across dimensions as the light burned through its shadowy form, unraveling centuries of accumulated darkness in seconds. Impossible, it gasped. No Luna has wielded this power since the first Luna sealed your kind away 1,000 years ago. Mona stepped forward, the light intensifying. She was my ancestor, her blood runs in my veins, her power lives in my wolf. And I am done being afraid of shadows. The Shadow Lord exploded into fragments of darkness that dissolved before they hit the ground. But the gate was still opening. The crack in reality had widened to nearly 6 feet across. Shadow creatures were beginning to squeeze through lesser beings, but there were thousands of them, an endless army waiting to pour into the world. Mona, Charlotte shouted. The gate, you have to close it. I know. But she didn't know how. The texts had spoken of the White Luna's ability to seal the gate, but they hadn't provided instructions, and she had maybe 30 seconds before the crack became too wide to stop. The blood, her wolf said urgently. The gate was opened with corrupted blood. It must be closed with pure blood. Your blood. Mona understood. She ran to the archway, dodging the grasping hands of shadow creatures, and pressed her still bleeding palm against the black stone. The reaction was immediate. Silver light blazed through the ancient symbols, racing along channels carved a millennium ago. The crack in reality shuddered, began to close, but the pressure from the other side was immense. The shadows pushed back, fighting to keep their doorway open. Mona gritted her teeth and pushed harder. More, her wolf urged. Give more. She gave everything. Every drop of moonlight in her blood. Every ounce of power the goddess had granted her. Every memory of suffering and survival, and hope that had brought her to this moment. She poured it all into the gate, and the gate slammed shut. The backlash threw her across the clearing, and she hit the ground hard, the world spinning around her. She heard screaming Nate's voice, Charlotte's voice, others she couldn't identify, but she couldn't move, couldn't think, could barely breathe. She'd given too much. Rest, her wolf whispered, and for once, the ancient presence sounded tired too. Rest now. We did it. The gate is sealed. Did we win? Yes, little moon. We won. Mona smiled and let the darkness take her. But it wasn't shadow darkness this time. It was the gentle darkness of exhaustion, of peace, of a battle finally finished. And somewhere in that darkness, she felt Nate's arms wrap around her, felt his voice calling her name, felt the mate bond blazing between them like a promise of tomorrow. She'd wake up, and everything would be different. Everything would be better. Chapter 10. The White Luna Rises. Mona woke to golden sunlight and the smell of pine. She was in a bed, a real bed, soft and warm, nothing like the concrete shelf of the kennels or even the guest chambers she'd occupied at Blackmore. This bed was enormous, draped in white silk, positioned beneath windows that offered a breathtaking view of mountains and forest and a lake that sparkled like scattered diamonds. You're awake. Nate sat in a chair beside the bed, and from the shadows under his eyes and the rumpled state of his clothes, he'd been there for a long time. How long? Mona's voice came out as a croak. 3 days. He leaned forward, taking her hand in both of his. You nearly died, Mona. You gave so much of yourself to seal the gate that your heart stopped twice on the way back to the castle. Leah had too. His voice broke. I thought I'd lost you. Before I even really had you. Mona squeezed his hand weakly. Takes more than a dimensional rift to kill me. I'm stubborn that way. Too. He laughed a wet, relieved sound, and pressed his forehead to their joined hands. Don't ever scare me like that again. No promises. Apparently my destiny involves a lot of dramatic near-death experiences. They stayed like that for a long moment, simply existing together, the mate bond humming between them like a song finally allowed to be sung. Then Mona asked the question she'd been dreading. What happened to Vicky? Nate's expression grew complicated. She's alive. When the gate closed, the shadow corruption was ripped out of her violently. She almost didn't survive the purging. He paused. She's been asking to see you. Asking or demanding? Asking. Genuinely asking. Whatever happened in that clearing, whatever you said to her, it changed something. He met her eyes. The council wanted to execute her for treason, opening the shadow gate, allying with darkness, endangering every pack under the moon. Any one of those crimes carries a death sentence. Mona's heart clenched. Despite everything Vicky had done, despite years of torment and a betrayal that had nearly ended the world, she didn't want the other woman dead. She wanted her to heal. What did you decide? I told them the decision belonged to you. You're the White Luna. She wronged you more than anyone. Her fate is yours to determine. The weight of that responsibility settled on Mona's shoulders. 3 weeks ago, she'd been scrubbing floors and sleeping in kennels. Now she held another person's life in her hands. I want to see her. They brought Vicky to the Great Hall not in chains, but escorted by guards, her movements carefully watched. She looked nothing like the golden girl who had tormented Mona for years. The shadow corruption had left marks, streaks of gray in her blonde hair, lines around her eyes that aged her a decade, a tremor in her hands that spoke of damaged nerves. She moved like someone who had been broken and imperfectly reassembled. But her eyes were clear. For the first time since Mona had known her, Vicky's eyes held no cruelty, no calculation, no simmering contempt, only exhaustion, and something that might have been shame. Luna. Vicky dropped to her knees without being commanded to. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I need you to know I need someone to know. She took a shuddering breath. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air. Mona had imagined this moment countless times during her years at Silvercrest, had fantasized about Vicky groveling before her, begging forgiveness, finally understanding the pain she'd caused. In her fantasies, it had felt satisfying. In reality, it just felt sad. Why did you hate me so much? Mona asked quietly. Before the Shadow Council, before you knew about your father, why did you make my life hell for all those years? Vicky's laugh was hollow. Because you had something I didn't. Even when you had nothing, no wolf, no status, no power. You had something inside you that I could see but couldn't understand. A light. A hope that refused to die, no matter what we did to you. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. I thought if I could extinguish it, I'd feel better about my own darkness. But every time you got back up, every time you kept going despite everything, it just proved what I already knew. Which was that you were better than me. Not stronger, not smarter, just better. In the ways that actually matter. Vicky's voice cracked. And I couldn't stand it, so I tried to destroy you. And when that didn't work, I tried to destroy the world. Silence fell over the great hall. The assembled Wolves Council members, Blackmore Pack, witnesses to history, waited to see what the White Luna would do. Mona descended from the dais and stood before her former tormentor. Stand up. Vicky rose slowly, her eyes fixed on the floor. Look at me. Those ice blue eyes met hers, and Mona saw the truth in them. The shame, the regret, the desperate, fragile hope that she might somehow earn redemption despite everything she'd done. The Shadow Council used you, Mona said. They found your wounds and poured poison into them. They told you half-truths designed to twist your grief into hatred. That doesn't excuse what you did, the years of abuse, the betrayal, the attempt to end the world, but it explains it. She took a breath. If I execute you, I prove that the White Luna is just another ruler who answers cruelty with cruelty. If I imprison you forever, I waste a life that might still do some good. She tilted her head. So I'm going to do something different. Vicky tensed, clearly expecting the worst. You're going to live, Mona said. But not as you were. You're going to spend the next 5 years in service to those you've harmed. Not as a slave, never that, but as a healer's assistant. You'll work beside Leah Spencer, learning to mend what you once broke. You'll tend the wounded, comfort the grieving, and see firsthand the consequences of violence and cruelty. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. At the end of 5 years, if Leah vouches for your transformation, you'll be free to build a new life wherever you choose. If not. Mona's eyes hardened slightly. We'll revisit this conversation. Vicky stared at her. You're giving me a chance? I'm giving you what no one ever gave me, the opportunity to become something more than what others decided you should be. Mona stepped back. Don't waste it. For a long moment, Vicky didn't move. Then she dropped to her knees again, not in submission, but in something deeper. Thank you, she whispered. I don't deserve this. But I swear to you, I swear on whatever's left of my soul, I won't waste it. I'll become someone worthy of the mercy you've shown me. I believe you, Mona said. And surprisingly, she did. The Council of Alphas remained at Blackmore for 3 more days, formalizing the White Luna's ascension and establishing new protocols for cooperation between packs. For the first time in centuries, the 12 great packs had a unifying figure, not a ruler who commanded obedience, but a leader who inspired unity. Mona's survival of the Shadow Gate, her defeat of a Shadow Lord, and her merciful judgment of Vicky had spread through the wolf world like wildfire. The White Luna was real, and she was nothing like anyone had expected. On the final evening, after the last treaty was signed and the last Alpha departed, Nate found Mona on the castle's highest balcony. You've been up here a lot, he observed. I like the view. She smiled without looking at him. It's hard to believe this is my life now. A month ago, I was wondering if I'd survive another week. Now I'm the White Luna, councils listen to my judgments, and I live in a castle with the most annoyingly handsome alpha in existence. Annoyingly handsome? It's very distracting. I'm trying to make important decisions, and you're just there, being attractive. It's inconsiderate, really. Nate laughed and moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. The bond, he said quietly. You never gave me an answer. Before the trials, before everything went sideways, you said you needed time to decide. Mona turned to face him. The mate bond pulsed between them, a golden thread that had only grown stronger through every trial and battle and quiet moment together. She'd felt it sustaining her when she sealed the gate. Felt it calling her back when her heart stopped. Felt it weaving itself into every corner of her soul until she couldn't imagine existence without it. I've decided, she said. Nate went very still. And, instead of answering with words, Mona reached up and pulled him into a kiss. But this wasn't like their first kiss in the moonlit forest, tentative and questioning. This was certainty. This was claiming. This was a promise sealed with something deeper than words. The mate bond blazed to life between them. Mona felt it complete, felt the final barriers dissolve, as her soul merged with his in a connection that would last beyond death itself. She felt his joy, his love, his fierce protective devotion. She felt herself reflected in his heart, saw the woman he saw when he looked at her, strong and brave and beautiful and worthy. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, Nate's eyes were blazing gold. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." Mona grinned. "You're stuck with me now, Alpha Chapman. I hope you know what you've gotten yourself into. A terrifyingly powerful white Luna, with a talent for dramatic speeches and an inability to stay out of danger." He pretended to consider. "I think I can handle it. We'll see." He pulled her close, and they stood together on the balcony as the sun set over the mountains, painting the world in shades of gold and rose. In the weeks that followed, life settled into something Mona had never dared to dream of. She ruled beside Nate not as his subordinate, but as his equal. The White Luna and the Alpha of Blackmore, united by bond and purpose. Together, they worked to strengthen the alliances between packs, to hunt down the remaining shadow wolves, to heal the wounds left by centuries of suspicion and conflict. It wasn't easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But for the first time in her life, Mona faced challenges with support, with love, with a pack that saw her not as a burden or a servant, but as family. Vicky began her service under Leah Spencer's watchful eye. The first months were difficult, old habits died hard, and there were days when the former Golden Girl seemed ready to shatter under the weight of her own guilt. But slowly, painfully, she began to change. Began to find meaning in healing rather than hurting. It would take years, maybe decades. But Mona believed in redemption. She had to. Her own existence was proof that broken things could become beautiful. 1 year after the blood moon, on the anniversary of her transformation, Mona returned to the place where everything had begun. The Silvercrest territory looked different in daylight, smaller somehow than it had loomed in her memories. The pack house where she'd scrubbed floors and endured beatings was just a building. The kennels where she'd slept with dogs were just concrete cells. The monsters she remembered were just wolves. Alpha Forbes had been removed from power by the council. His treatment of the White Luna deemed an unforgivable stain on his leadership. The Silvercrest pack was now led by a younger Alpha One who had reached out to Mona personally to apologize for his pack's actions and swear that such cruelty would never happen again. She'd accepted his apology. She hadn't forgiven. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she'd moved forward. "Are you okay?" Nate asked, standing beside her at the edge of the territory. "I'm better than okay." Mona turned to look at him, her mate, her partner, her equal. "I'm free. I'm loved. I'm exactly who I was always meant to be." She shifted, her white wolf emerging in a cascade of moonlight. Nate shifted beside her, his black wolf pressing against her flank. Together, they raised their heads and howled. The sound echoed across the mountains, across the forests, across every territory where wolves made their homes. It was a howl of triumph and healing, a howl that said, "I survived and I am here, and I will never be broken again." And somewhere, in the light of the moon that had always watched over her, Mona could have sworn she heard her grandmother's voice. "I'm proud of you, little moon. I always knew you were special." And so, Mona Schultz, once called Nothing, now called Luna, howled beneath the moon that had always known her name. Dear viewer, as we come to the end of Mona's journey, I want to leave you with a question that stayed with me long after I finished telling this story. Mona spent 22 years believing she was broken because the world kept telling her she was. 22 years of accepting a lie as truth. So I have to ask you, what lie have you been believing about yourself? What voice from your past still whispers that you're not enough? That you're too broken, too different, too late to become who you were meant to be? Maybe, like Mona, your wolf isn't missing. Maybe it's just waiting for you to stop believing the people who never deserved to define you. Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if Mona's story touched something in you today, if it made you feel seen, or gave you even a small spark of hope, tap that like button. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to this channel. It tells me to keep finding stories like this one. Stories about the broken ones who rise. Stories about the nothings who become everything. Thank you for staying until the end. You're exactly the kind of viewer Mona would be proud of. Until next time.